Okay, so now, sir, I'm going to get you you can go ahead and start with your story. Announce who you are, and then and then off you go.
Right.
And you can
Okay.
you can look at me if it's easier.
No.
Yes.
Right, Eric John Downs, one of 11 children, born in southeast London in 1921. Seven of the children went to Roan Grammar School in Greenwich. We were in Lewisham, southeast London. We got badly bombed during the bombing there. I got blown up and not badly injured, obviously. But then, when I was 18, I applied to join the Air Force as a pilot. Went through the rigmarole there. We went to Lord's Cricket Ground to get inculcated in whatever. Eventually, up to Greenock in Scotland, and got on a little cargo ship called the SS Banfora, which was only 8,000 tons. And of course, it was at the peak of the U-boat troubles. But they crammed about 1,000 of us, 1,000 young aircrew, onto this boat in most appalling conditions. And we set off to America with the passenger ship and 2 destroyers. And we took nearly 3 weeks to get across the North Atlantic, being hounded by U-boats all the time, and arrived at not Moncton. Where did we arrive at?
That's correct. That's correct. You arrived in Moncton, I think. Yes.
Oh, we arrived at
Canada.
Moncton, yes, in Canada, yes. Yes. Where I caught pneumonia after, so, yes. So that put me back 5 or 6 weeks. It did give me a chance to go on holiday in New York for a week, actually, which all by myself as a young 18-year-old. But then on the train down to Sweetwater in Texas, which was a new BFTS, and started flying. But after 6 weeks, they decided they'd close the BFTS at Sweetwater, and the 50 students there were separated and sent to the other 6 flying training schools. And off I went to Phoenix, Arizona. But there were problems there, more delays, and I was put back from 9 course to 11 course. I never knew quite why. And that's where the story starts, really, 11 course, Phoenix, Arizona. I was additional student to an instructor who already had 4 students, and they were all the W's, so White, Waters, Walsh, and another one. And that was it. I continued my training and finished in 7 or 8 months. Got my wings and back up to New York on the Queen Elizabeth and back to the UK in 3 days. So Wilkinson was the other W, the 4 W's, I should forget them. Waters killed himself in Superstition Mountain, actually. He crashed there on a solo flight. Yeah. Mr. Wilkinson was shot down on his first trip back in England on Lancasters and was survived as a POW for 4 years, 3 years. And Mr. White, no idea what happened to Mr. Walsh. White I've met up with later, actually, and he's did a tour on Mosquito night fighters over Germany, actually. Now, what comes next?
Well, I noticed that it's unusual, though, that you had the W's with you, because you were Downs.
Yes.
And I know that they separated them with
Yes,
with the
that's
end of the
right.
name, so it was unusual that you had
Yeah,
the
well, that was
W's
addition.
with you.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit about how you found the training itself? How did you find the flight training?
Well, we were young, 18, 19 years old, and it was quite exciting actually, and very fortunate to be able to do that, I think. And Arizona, of course, was the ideal place to do it because there was no weather really most of the time, and we flew in clear skies. I don't remember too much about the social life there. I was not one for partying and the rest of it. So, but the training was, exciting, fine. I had no traumas that I can think of actually at this stage.
Did you mind how did you feel about your instructor?
Well, Mr. Mills, we didn't get on at all, and I'm sure he did his best to get me suspended, I think, actually. That was my opinion. After that, it was 3 or 4 instructors. Mr. Schultz was my final instructor on the advanced side, and he was a quiet man, didn't fuss at all, and I think I got on well with him. I think I upset the flight commander on my first solo. You go up there and first time up in the air by yourself, and apparently I cut him up on the final approach, and he was a fierce man, a Mr. Bacon, and when I got down, full of myself, but I got clobbered and put down to size quite quickly by Mr. Bacon, who told me the facts of flying life, as it were. Otherwise, flying was fine, and well, that was my time in America.
Were you given a family that kind of looked after you, or was kind of overseeing you?
Not at Phoenix, no. In Sweetwater, I had a family who it was the first course there, and people were excited, I think, at seeing you British boys, as they called us, and they used to come and take us out for weekends. And I was very fortunate. Some people came to take me out for the weekend, and Robinson was their name, that's right. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. And they had 2 little daughters called Margie Louise and Nancy Nell. They were little 3 and 5-year-olds, lovely little girls, yeah. But of course I was only there for 6 weeks, and
But they didn't give you anyone in Phoenix then?
no, I knew no one in Phoenix, no.
Oh,
no.
how funny.
Well,
so you really only knew the W's?
That's it. that happens occasionally. That's the birds chopping things on the roof. Oh no, I knew the whole course, but the W's were my instructors, and as a group. So at the school, you did ground school in the morning, and you flew in the afternoon, or vice versa. And so.
In a letter home once to your brother Aubrey, who was following in your footsteps, you said that Falcon Fields was the best training place ever, and you had some fantastic places to go and see, Santa Monica,
Grand Canyon, yes.
all those places, and you recommended that he got there if he could.
Okay.
My younger brother, yes, Aubrey, followed me in training over there, but he went to Clewiston in Florida. I don't know how he got on there. He was 2 years behind me. I was out doing other things then, in trying to win the war. And yes, well, Phoenix, as obviously you know, has got bags of interest around it. And yes, we went to California, went to Hollywood. Who was the film star that
Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck, was it?
No.
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant. entertainers at Hollywood, yes. And there's a photograph there if you want to see it. But went to other places, Grand Canyon and Falstaff up in the hills there. And so we didn't get much time off there. These were only, weekends and whatever. I had a week in Hollywood, actually. That was interesting. Yes, and then back on the train back to England, yes.
Who did you go to Hollywood with?
Who is...
When you went to Hollywood, who did you go with? Do you remember?
No, probably by myself.
Ah.
No, we used to hitch a ride to Hollywood. I forget.
Don't worry.
Yes, it was a chap. He was suspended from flying in the end, actually. An Irishman, a nice lad, actually. I can get his name for you if you like. But yes, I went with him. We stopped on the way back at Palm Springs, at a very lush hotel, I remember. And the lady who gave us a lift back owned the hotel. And so we had 2 or 3 days, the rest of our holiday in Palm Springs, which was quite fantastic then, yeah. It was much smaller then than it is now, actually. It was only just developing, of course. So that was it as far as...
And then what was there, this is a really odd question, I know, but did you ever attend a church while you were there?
I'm not a church man, I never have been. I was a choir boy for 2 or 3 years, but I was disenchanted with the church. There were church services at the camp, of course. I cannot recall them at all, actually.
Okay.
They didn't impinge upon me. No.
And did you enjoy the pool?
Swimming pool was lovely. I had to I was a gentle young man, actually, and I had 2 rather rough and tough northeastern Northumberland students on the course, and I do recall I couldn't swim when I went there at all. And these 2 roughnecks, Mann and Rushton, they gave me hell in the pool. They tried to drown me. I was learning to swim, and they tried to drown me. It was only youthful exuberance, but you see, I never forget their names after all those years, actually.
That's pretty good.
They were fellow students, yes. So they made an impression on me, yes.
And then, did you ever drive a car while you were there?
No, we weren't qualified to drive cars at all. I can't remember anyone who was qualified to drive a car. No.
And then, what about the food? What did you think about the food?
Well, having come from rationed England, of course, the food was remarkable, and I'm not a great food man myself, but yes, the different food. You had sweet stuff with savoury stuff. Breakfast was peaches and with eggs and bacon, and which took a little bit of getting used to, but I think we were well fed. And oranges were most important, because for wartime in England we could get no fruit at all, actually, and so for bringing up as a young man and a youth, to suddenly find there were oranges and apples and things like that available was quite remarkable. In fact, I used to scrump over into the orange groves at Phoenix to go and get half a dozen oranges and whatever.
Those orange groves are beautiful.
Are they still there?
Yes, yes. They always smell so wonderful. Do you remember what months you were there?
What?
What months? From what month to what month?
Yes, she'll tell you in a moment. Yes.
And then what would be, if you had to pick one memory from that time period, what memory would you pick?
Trying to think of something significant, I think. It might be flying up high When we got onto the AT-6As, the Harvards, you could get up to 20,000 feet just. No oxygen at all, of course, and we were young, so it didn't seem to bother us at all. But yes, I think flying up and up and up to 20,000 feet, yes. Which was very naughty of us. But,
Which planes did you fly when you were there?
well, it was Stearman was the basic trainer, and then the Harvard. The AT-6A, the Americans called it. We called it the Harvard, which was a...
August 42 to February 43.
Okay, so you were there from August to February of
Yeah.
1943.
Yes, so we had the so-called winter there, yes.
Okay, well, yes, I was going to say, if you were there in August, it was very hot then,
Oh,
wasn't
yes,
it?
yes, yes.
So if you can just mention that those were the days, those were the months you were there between, that would be grand.
Yes, well, I arrived there in August, yes. We'd got used to the heat by then in Texas, and so, I wasn't bothered by the heat at all, I don't think. And as winter came on, of course, we got some of these great thunderstorms and blows that we got there, and got flooded, but not many actually. The weather didn't really impinge upon me at all. We got lovely cumulus cloud to go and play with in the skies when we were out flying solo, because it's quite exhilarating to have big fluffy cumulus clouds to dive in and out of, yes. But otherwise, weather wasn't too significant, so we got used to the heat, I think, and I'm trying to think about what else about the heat. Nighttime sleeping was a problem. We used to sleep 6 or 8 in a room, and so it was a bit of a sweaty business. But we didn't wear clothes, did we, out there then? So
Swimming pool.
we were all right.
Swimming.
The pool, yes. I just mentioned the swimming. I learned to swim there, which was a great boon. Yes.
What about the night flying?
Well, exciting, I suppose you'd say. It was all part of the system. Clear skies above mostly, and so we had stars to see down on us, and a moon, but I found it quite exciting, yes.
Because I know some people, they found the night flying, a little bit of a challenge, but then there's been other people that have found that it was, that it was something that they enjoyed. That's why I thought I would ask
see,
that.
yes.
Because one of the gentlemen we were with yesterday, he loved night flying because he could see really well. So he really enjoyed the night flying. So that's why I was curious about that.
Yes.
So now, Anita, are there any other things you can think of, events that happened?
She wasn't there.
Not in Falcon Fields, no.
Well, when I came back to this country, you mean, afterwards?
Yes, so yeah, if you want to share some memories of that, that's grand, that's grand. Can you think of anything, Vince, I'm missing?
Did he mention that he's gone back since he's left?
Oh, yes, that's a good one. If you can mention about when you went back since you've left, when you went back, how you found it, why you went back.
He hasn't been back to Falcon Fields.
Oh, haven't you?
No.
Never been back.
Oh, I thought you had. Oh, I'm
No.
sorry.
No.
Oh, okay, so you haven't been to Falcon Field. Oh, well, then there's that then.
That's fine. Or else maybe a message for the.
Oh, yes.
How has Phoenix, the airfield, developed? I believe Mesa's grown out towards the airfield, hasn't it? Yes. Is the airfield still functioning?
Yes.
It is, yes.
Yes. Vince was there actually not too long ago.
Yeah, they have a museum there as well as now the whole airfield.
Have they?
It's
Yes.
expanded. Yeah,
Yes.
it's quite large now.
And in fact, my uncle spotted the plane that he flew when he was there. He spotted, because in the museum they have all of the planes.
Oh, the Stearmans, I say,
And
yes.
he spotted his plane. Do you have, if you were to impart a message to all the people that will be attending the reunion at Falcon Field, what would you say?
I would say congratulations to them for keeping the memory going, actually. I'd like to be there myself, but I obviously won't travel that distance now at my age. Must be very interesting, actually, for them. And of course there are not many of my era there now. There won't be. So it's be daughters and sons and whatever who are there at the reunion, I think. As a matter of, did you get any older members there at all?
No, but you're the oldest member that we've had in the UK, but nobody can travel there. Even though there was a family of the pilot was 97, and he was thinking of going, but at the moment no one can travel to America.
No.
So anybody that was thinking of going, and then we had another lady, she was planning on going. But again, nobody can go.
I think Catherine has thoughts of going. She went to one, didn't she?
But I don't think she's got. Well, she was waiting, I think, until this week or next week to make up her. She finally had to make a decision.
I see.
But I don't think she can get in.
No, I see.
Because unless you're a U.S. citizen, they won't let you into the country. So I think she was having to possibly, bow out anyway.
Is that COVID related?
Yes. Well, yes. Well, I think COVID. I think it's COVID and yes, because they're not allowing anybody. I mean, for instance, if you're a citizen, you can get back into the country, but other than that, I don't think they're allowed. Now, whether that's changed or not, I know she was keeping track of it really well, so maybe it's changed in the last couple of weeks. But I know that the last time we discussed it, she wasn't sure that she could even go, and so that was a question that was pending, whether she finally had to knock it on the head or see if she could go ahead. But some of the other people, for instance, one of the gentlemen, he now feels he's a bit too frail to go because he had a fall last week. And so he feels he's too frail. Then there's another lady, she was willing to go, but she can't go at the moment because they won't let her in. Yeah. So sadly, I don't think anybody, unless Catherine ends up going, is going because they can't.
No, at our time life, it's not good to sitting in an aeroplane for 6 or 8 hours either.
That's
actually,
the thing is that was the challenge. Although and then there was another gentleman we had. He said the flight was just too long for him, even though he could probably do it. He said it was just too long a flight and all of the changes and everything. So sadly, a lot of the people that were intending to go, and my uncle, he won't go because he doesn't like really to leave his house that much, and so
You've got lists.
yeah, exactly. So yes, nobody I know at the moment is actually going.
Your uncle was trained out there, was he?
Yes, yes.
What course number?
He was on number 20.
20.
And so, but he requires new hips that he's never agreed to do, and so consequently he has struggles walking.
Yeah.
So, but mentally he's grand.
What did he do when he came back?
He ended up doing computers. He was one of the first people to work on the first 3 computers in the UK. And then he developed a system for blind people using the computer.
But did he fly afterwards or not?
No, he never did. Funnily enough, there's been, other than I think yourself, there's only been so far one other gentleman who flew when he got back, but then he did not fly after the war.
No, as the courses went on, and they got to 20 course plus, there was the war was ending actually, and
exactly.
very few of them.
Yes, but now I know you went on with your career, so please share the memories of that you have that that stick in your mind. I know you have lots of them.
Yes, well, I came back and converted onto twin-engine aircraft, the Oxford, the Strawberry, expecting to go off to fight the war, actually. I was going on to Mosquitoes. It was a new plane they were introducing, actually, but there was a delay in that happening, and so they sent me off to train crews for Bomber Command, which was strange considering I'd never been there, but anyway, and for 2 months I went off to the extreme North Wales there, all quiet and lovely, and trained crews for Bomber Command. We trained navigators, wireless operators, bomb aimers and second pilots. And that was for 2 months, so they told me, and eventually I couldn't escape. They said, "You're here," and shut up, and so I had nearly 2 years up there training. And eventually I got onto Bomber Command, straight onto the Pathfinder force on May the 6th, just the date the war finished, actually. So I was flying Lancasters with no war to go to. But then I set out to, the Japanese was still a problem, and I set out to go to Okinawa, which had been captured from the Japanese, to attack the Japanese. And then, of course, the 2 bombs were dropped at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I was only halfway out there, so that was my war effort. And
But then you continued on though, didn't you?
I stayed in the Middle East, yes. Then converted on to Dakotas and spent 4 or 5 years in India and Burma and Malaya, mostly resupplying the troops who were fighting the Chinese communists in Malaya particularly. And the partition of India was quite a traumatic affair for the people living there. And I used to fly between India and what is now Pakistan, transferring staff and people and troops. So I had an interesting 4 or 5 years out there.
Funny enough, the gentleman we were with yesterday, he came back and he ended up spending 2 years in India.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to go out and he was
Yeah,
doing
that was
something at the pass.
Quite
so-
traumatic experience
Yes,
for young men from our background to see these. It was mayhem. There were 1 million people were killed there actually, and we saw a lot of that. So
Yes,
I suppose you can say we grew up. And then most of my subsequent service has been involved in instructing other students to fly, amongst other various things they give you.
You did have a funny time over the Himalayas. You were flying over the Himalayas once, and not another aeroplane in the sky because you didn't hit. And over the radio, someone said, "What's up, Doc?"
What's up, Doc?
Someone had seen him, but he didn't see the aircraft. So
There wasn't the number of people flying then at the end of the war. There was no civil flying at all. And we just had 2 squadrons out in Malaya, one at Moripur, Karachi, and another one in Delhi. And so we were operating singly most of the time. Just one aircraft would go off and pick up people and of course there was traumatic situation at these various situations. I mean, in the northwest frontier, Peshawar I used to fly into, which is just over the borders from Abyssinia, and Calcutta at the other end. It was just both on partition lines for the Indians and Pakistanis. And there was mayhem, there was nearly 1 million people. They slaughtered each other, actually. And we were involved in that, trying to evacuate people. And so there weren't many aircraft flying, but as Anita was saying, you could be flying up in the Himalayas or somewhere, clear blue sky, and not having seen another aircraft for days maybe. And at the time, there was a cartoon character called Bugs Bunny in the papers, and 1 or 2 of the chaps were quite involved mentally in this thing, and you suddenly hear a call over the radio. Had been silenced for hours before, and "Hey, what's up, Doc?" And of course I knew who it was. Only 2 or 3 chaps involved, and he'd obviously been flying somewhere up there. I couldn't see him at all, and that was all I heard. A little bit of childish amusement, I suppose, but there we are. That was Johnny Owen, his name was, actually. Yes. But that was, an interesting and exciting time, really, for us. I flew all over India. I think I I landed in my service career at 182 airfields, actually. If you try to find 182 airfields on the map, a lot of them aren't there now, of course, but and that's over 5 continents. So I did America and Europe and Asia and India, Africa. But I've got a map in the other room there, if you're interested in seeing it. It won't show up on the film, will it? No, it won't. But so that was my...
Do you know how many miles altogether you travelled
No.
during your career?
Well, I did about 4,500 hours, I think, in the sky. So if you multiply that by a couple of 150 or something, you'll get the idea. It was all eventually on transport, on instructing. One interesting feature is that every other posting I got, I went back to instructing. And I think I've got names of 520 students in my logbook. So I must have supplied half the Air Force, I would have actually, over those years.
You then went on to the Far East.
Hmm?
You then went over to the Far East.
Yeah.
After India.
India, I went to, yes, Burma and Malaya, yes. And I flew into China when the communists were taking it over, actually. This was interesting. Into Shanghai.
You went and picked up 66 Dayak headhunters.
Hmm?
You picked up 66 Dayak headhunters.
Oh, yes, well, that was when I was in, yes.
in Borneo.
That was quite interesting, really, because in the Dakota you had 22 seats, 11 either side. But when we were operating out there, we took the seats out, and the evacuees, the people we brought out of India because of the partition, and afterwards used to go across to Malaya and Burma to pick up Dayak headhunters. They used to come back and guide the British troops in the jungle, actually. And so I did a few trips, and I'd have about 30 or 40 Dayak chaps, and they were quite remarkable little men because they'd never seen an aeroplane, and they jumped in the back of my aeroplane, and quite happily. I remember coming back once, and I smelt fire in the aircraft, of course, which is a terrible hazard sort of thing. And when I went back to investigate, the Dayaks were having a little brew up sort of thing, so they made a fire on the floor in the aircraft, yes. So that was one little incident, actually. But they were lovely little chaps. It was an interesting time in Malaya and Burma at that time.
The Yangtze River incident.
Hmm?
The Yangtze River incident, HMS Amethyst.
Yes, I was. I missed all the exciting bits, which got me a bemedaled officer, sort of thing. I was the Amethyst, the British destroyer, used to go up to Chongqing in China, actually. But then when the Chinese communists took over the place, they came down from the north, and the destroyer Amethyst had gone to Chongqing. On its way back, it got stuck on the Yangtze River. It got stuck on Sandbar, about 100 miles north of Shanghai, and they'd been shelled by the Chinese, actually, and so they'd lost their captain, I think, and 2 or 3 other pieces, and I had to go up and drop medical supplies to them. That was the thought. But in between my setting off from Hong Kong up to where they were, 100 miles north, the Chinese shelled it again and killed the doctor who was on board, actually. And so I had medical supplies, but they wanted the doctor, so I was told to divert back to Hong Kong. And they flew a Sunderland with the doctor, who landed beside the Amethyst in the river. And the Amethyst got on power and came out and got away all right, actually. So another moment of glory, I got back to Shanghai and picked up the air attaché, and then I think about 20 British people who were with the communists just the other side of the river, actually, which was interesting, yes.
Were you ever scared? Did you have any
No,
fear? Were you ever scared?
I was aware, dear. Can't say I was scared. It was an exciting time, actually. My brief then was rather strange, I couldn't get back to Hong Kong. I hadn't got enough petrol. Shanghai airfield was chaos and closed. I couldn't get any petrol there, but the air attaché there, a young man called Howard Williams, a squad leader, he managed to get 3 50-gallon drums of petrol for me out in the airfield there. My instructions were that I should go and get my passengers on board and go and land beside the cruiser London, which was 50 miles offshore to the south, actually, and ditch the aircraft. But I got the petrol, so I got enough petrol to get back to Hong Kong. Another moment of interest and glory gone, sort of thing. And I remember the name of the captain of the Sunderland, Brian Ret'd, was awarded the DFC for his activities. And I got no recognition at all of mine, but there we are.
But now, when did you have the DFC though, don't you?
No, I had the
MBE.
MBE.
Oh, so, and what did you get your MBE?
That was
for?
Here. I set up and organised the World Gliding Championships here. Actually, I was based here at South Sydney, and that was an admin job. They said I knew all about flying, that sort of thing. So, yes, I gathered the aircraft. I made sure the latrines. We had 1,500 people come in the airfield there actually, and the food had to be organised and all that sort of thing. I've just been looking through a book of mine, listing what I had to do, sort of thing. So, yes, and that was the MBE. But I should not have had. I should have had something for my flying experience. I think I was recommended to the AFC when I was in North Wales there, and 3 of us were put up, and 2 got it, and I didn't.
You just missed out there.
Yes. I think I deserved it there because I was bored stiff with what I was doing there, training these chaps, and there was a sort of a pilots' union there actually, and if the weather was bad, which it often was in North Wales, they would send a message on the WT, and I never forget, it's called BAR, and they'd send out a BAR, which meant returning to base, weather no good at all, actually. And I couldn't stand this, so I used to plough around if I thought the weather was at all decent. But these other lads used to get fed up with what they were doing and send BAR, and the whole rigmarole, about 20 answers, would fly back to base. And so I pressed on and did the thing, yes. So I got good experience on cloud flying and weather flying, yes.
Did you ever think, oh my gosh, I'm only 18, I'm only 19, and I'm doing these unbelievable things?
No, you didn't. No, I don't think any of us did, actually.
But in hindsight, do you think, oh my gosh, I was really young when I did all of that?
Not really. It was a young man's job, I think, really, you know, flying aeroplanes, and particularly operational aeroplanes. And I think at that age you didn't think of dying or not living at all, sort of thing, which you get very aware of later on, of course. But and the excitement of doing it was overcame most other thoughts, I think. I mean, I was so keen to get onto operations of Bomber Command, and with hindsight, the fact that I didn't save my life, but I've been lucky in that respect. I got onto the Pathfinder Force in the end because when I got to Lancaster's, flying Lancaster bombers in the end, I'd done well over 1,000 hours flying. So most young lads, when they got onto Lancaster, had only done 250 hours flying, 300 hours flying. So I had the experience anyway of weather flying and whatever.
What was your favourite plane altogether? What was your favourite one?
Well, they all did different things. The Lancaster was, you know, it was exciting to fly. The Dakota was nice and easy at all. And apart from that, there are mostly training type aircraft. Jet provosts, the introduction of flying training on jets came after the war there, and I started out on that actually, on the first jet provost training. And I'm still interested that they are so easy to fly, the jets, compared with the piston aircraft for various reasons. In a piston aircraft, the propeller causes swinging on takeoff and landing and that sort of thing. And you've got a tail wheel which makes landing more difficult. The aircraft tends to swing on landing, particularly on these small little planes we flew. On the jet provosts, you are not pulled by propeller, you're pushed from behind actually, and so it stays straight. And so when it came to training pupils, you could normally tell within 10 or 12 hours on a piston type aircraft with a tail wheel who was going to make it or who wasn't. But on the jet provosts, it was easy, there was no swing on takeoff or landing, and it was difficult to tell whether they would make eventual pilots. And so it often took up to 60 hours flying before they got onto the more advanced formation flying and instrument flying, that sort of thing, before you could tell their abilities. And I did recommend to the Air Force that they should give pilots a short spell on piston aircraft beforehand. It would be easier, because we were going to have 60 hours flying with these chaps, and then half a dozen of the course would get suspended. So it was a costly business to fly them up to 60 hours. Yes. And what happened just before I retired, they decided that I'd been right, and and they gave me the primary flying squadron here, which was flying students on little chipmunk aircraft with a tail for 25 hours to see who would make the grade or who wouldn't. And so things went around, sort of thing.
Yes, they went
and
around.
that's where I finished here.
In the meantime, you were out in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, flying again, and then also Rhodesia.
Yes, well, I was just one of my... You get so many various jobs in the Air Force. One of them, I went out as chief flying instructor to the Ceylon Air Force. It was an embryo Air Force, just starting up, and I trained the pilots out there, and starting them off with an Air Force, yes. 3 or 4, 5 or 6 different aircraft we flew, too many. But they've progressed from there and, got up to date.
How have you, would you say the proportion of people that you've managed to pass, as opposed the ones that failed, would you say that it's a bigger proportion that have passed that come to you? When you have to fail someone, is that a difficult thing to do?
It's not pleasant. I didn't find it difficult, no. It's saving their lives, really, because a lot of those chaps who are slightly inadequate, if they got into a dangerous situation, they couldn't cope with. And so they went off and became navigators or bomb aimers, yeah.
Now, someone mentioned yesterday about the Mosquito, that the Mosquito was an awful plane. Would you agree with that?
I thought the Mosquito was a lovely plane, but there were various Mosquitoes. I think it was a lovely plane, actually. I never flew them, but I've got this book about them. I was going to fly them. The problem with it was there were just 2 people in the Mosquito, and it was quite small. And the book I've got, the pilot keeps on all the time about being so cramped in the cockpit, because the pilot sat there and the navigator was right beside him, sort of thing. And if you go out for 6 hours flying, which they could do, they had overload tanks on the wings, and to sit there for 6 hours cramped up like that wasn't pleasant. And also if you needed to escape, modern aircraft, you pull the thing down and you'll get popped out. You've got to open the hatch and try to struggle out of your harness and whatever, and the parachute's on your bottom, and you've got to get that as well. And that was a problem with the Mosquito and the Bow fighter, which were two. But I would have loved to have flown a Mosquito. I never got a chance.
Interesting, interesting. It's interesting different people's take, you know,
On it, yeah.
Yes, uh-huh.
Yes, and there were different marks of mosquitoes. Some were developed for radar contacting the German aircraft in flight, and radar was developing quite quickly then. And so you got big sets of radar, they're not little things you get now. You know, it was, if you had radar, you had like one of your sound things in there. And so there was even less room in the Mosquito, and that's what they complained about, actually.
Interesting. Okay, is there anything else you can think of? Anita? Are we missing anything?
No, you did a tour in Rhodesia. Dad was always very sporty, played for all the teams going, cricket, hockey.
One good thing about the Air Force was that particularly early on, sport was all part of the life in the Air Force. And I was keen at all the sports, and so you did get to represent your station or your command or the Air Force at the particular sport you were expert at. And so, yes, I played cricket and hockey and squash and tennis, and you know, if I like to spread all the knowledge about it, I had a trial for Rhodesia at hockey, and I played for Singapore stateside at hockey as well, actually. But it never developed because you were flying, and most of these extremely good sports teams want you there for training 2 or 3 nights a week. Rhodesia was a case in point. Every 3 nights a week you had a report. Well, I was off flying my airplane 3 nights a week, sort of thing. So I couldn't attend, and so it never developed. But I played sport all my time in the Air Force, and particularly early on, and I was the cricket captain and hockey captain and so on at various stations I was at and the various commands, and so that was probably one of the reasons I'm still here, I think, actually.
So, do you wish you would have been able to spend some more time on the sports then?
Well, flying was more important than sport, actually, so it was balancing it, yes.
I noticed that you have, is it a South African restaurant cafe in the village?
It's only just opened up, actually,
Oh,
yes,
has
yes,
it?
yes.
Because Bra is South African, isn't it?
Yes, right.
So I was wondering if that was what they were.
I'm not being there at all, no. It was the post office, actually, and which was very convenient, and the postmaster had a little store there for food and that sort of thing, and the newspapers, and the post office closed for a while during the Troubles, and I think they've opened up the post office as a little cubicle, and the chap who ran the little shop there sold it, and they made it into a restaurant. I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I walked past it.
Sorry, I went off piece there a minute. So, is there anything I haven't thought of, Vince?
I think it's pretty
Falcon
well
Field, really, yes.
It's pretty well covered.
We're good?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're good then. See, that was painless, wasn't it?
Yes.
Very
You
painless.
sure?
Proper intro, yeah?
I think we do. We could do an intro again, and then we just have to get pictures of all the bits, because I believe you have a wall of accolades. Thank you very much. That word.
My landings.
Word, but
A map on the wall, you said?
yes.
In the next room, yes.
Yes.
Go and have a look at it, yes.
So if we could get if we could get some pictures of that,
Yeah.
that'll be grand.
Mm.
So yes, but maybe what we'll do is we'll do the introduction again. So if you could just say your name and say the positions you were in, you know, because I'm guessing you progressed, you know, through the and then the fact at Falcon Field you did the 6 and 9 course. 6 and 9, right? No, 9 and 11.
9 and 11.
9 and 11.
And you're a squadron leader.
You don't want a picture of my family at all?
Well, what we'll do is when we get the pictures of the pictures, we'll get those pictures. So if you want to go ahead and do your introduction, That'll be grand.
Right, Eric John Downs. I joined the Air Force in 1941, eventually for pilot training. Went to America, incidentally across the Atlantic in February 1941, chased by U-boats. Went to Moncton in Canada and then down to British Flying Training School, Sweetwater, Texas, number 7. Flew there for 6 weeks, went solo and the rest of it. The school then closed and we were transferred to number 6, British Flying Training School, Phoenix, Arizona, which is quite delightful, lovely part of the world to be in. And that's where I did my pilot training.
Perfect.
All right?
Perfect.